much as possible and recognizing the limitations.
What? Is this day just getting better? Andy No released an interview an hour ago admitting he made up the term Trantifa. Did I just win again? Did I just win again with a different influencer within the span of like 10 minutes? Did I literally just, can someone confirm that? Thank you, Andy, for being honest about the fact that you made up the term Trantifa and it's not a real term. Okay, breaking news. Let's see what Andy Knows said, because Reagan just posted the clip. Let's see what he actually said.
Revolution in it, this agenda of violent left-wing revolution for trans rights matches enough. There's some overlap with some of the Antifa agenda. So this sort of merging of the two ideologies, I've come up with the term, I call it Trantifa, that it's the two concentric circles have so much overlap.
Andy, that is so fucking ridiculous. These ideologies merged in the 70s, bro. I mean, okay, yes, he is admitting that he made up the term Trantifa, and that is a positive thing. Andy No made up the term Trantifa, but for Andy No to actually be trying to sell to people, these ideologies just merged. This trans ideology and the Antifa ideology, they just merged, and I just invented this term to describe this new phenomenon. Andy? They merged in the 70s with Stonewall and the Gay Liberation Front, and it actually started happening before that. So it did not just happen. It happened in the 19 well, it happened really before that. We can look at Compton's Cafeteria Riot in 1966. You can look at Stonewall in 1969. Stonewall was the start of the gay liberation movement. That's when the Gay Liberation Front was created. That is when all of this shit started merging. You started having this bubble up in punk communities in San Francisco and New York in the 70s and into the 80s. In 80s, you had the ACT UP movement. The ACT UP movement was the first real queer liberation movement. I'm literally writing a book about this right now for people who are wondering how I know all this off the top of my head. Moving into the 90s, in 1990, you had Queers Read This, which was the first kind of like big pronunciation and manifesto of queer Marxism. 1990, Andy. 1990. And by the way, it's not even a trans agenda. Andy isn't even using the proper term. It's not a trans agenda. It is a queer agenda, which are two different things. You do not need to be trans to be queer. You do not need to be gay to be queer. Queer is a far left political ideology, and that is what he's talking about. And this has been going on for decades. So congrats on admitting you made up the term, bro. But you still don't know the history. And by the way, the reason that Andy No doesn't know the history is because he never looked at the information that I sent him several times. It's not that Andy No didn't have access to this information. Andy No has had direct access to this information from me because I was trying to teach him this behind the scenes, privately, where no one had to know, because all I wanted was for Andy No to properly inform his audience of what was going on. That was all I wanted. I didn't even want credit in this case. And I've showed the DMs, and I will always, I have the DMs that I can show if I ever need to prove this. People, so many people have been talking to me lately about they're like, Karlyn, why don't you work with Andy No? 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 I fucking tried. I sent Andy No all this information privately. He didn't have to credit me. All I wanted was for him to properly inform the public of what was going on and what was happening. He had direct access to all of this literally months ago. Okay? He didn't want to listen. He didn't look at it. He didn't even respond to it. And then he starts Trantifa, a term he made up that isn't even fucking real.
And this agenda of violent left-wing revolution for trans rights matches enough. There's some overlap with some of the Antifa agenda. So this sort of merging of the two ideologies, I've come up with the term. I call it Trantifa. That it's the two concentric circles have so much overlap now that it's
No.
almost one movement.
No,
And I saw
wrong,
that 5
wrong,
years ago
wrong.
in the
5 years
arrest
ago?
data set.
5
People
years
might
ago.
remember I was
Really?
releasing
Because
all
it's been
these
happening
mugshots.
since
Took
the
a lot of work. So I was
70s.
doing public records requests for every individual
5
one.
years
There were
ago.
hundreds
Please,
just in
Andy.
Portland.
Please.
And then I would look into the backgrounds, and I found that up to 30% on any given night of a riot where there were dozens of arrestees, that the individuals were somehow gender diverse.
Andy still hasn't caught up. You know what? Dare to dream. Maybe he will someday.